Hi, everybody, and welcome to Bon Voyage Besties, your favorite travel podcast all about travel, friendship, empowerment, and so much more. My name is Rachel, and my co host is Rosa. Today, we're going to be discussing something a little bit different. We know a lot of you are solo travelers and you love taking solo trips. This episode is going to focus on safety for solo travel because it can be a rewarding experience and it offers freedom to explore on your own terms and all that good stuff. However, you also need to ensure your safety along the way to make sure that your trip is awesome and is memorable. So, in this episode, we're going to dive into essential tips for solo travel safety, covering absolutely everything from preparing for your trip, staying connected with loved ones while you're on the road, trusting your instincts, and so much more. I think this episode will be beneficial whether you're a new solo traveler or if you're an experienced adventurer. I think we always need to brush up on this because it is important. And yeah, let's get started about how to travel solo, safe, smart, and secure.
Totally. So, like Rachel said, traveling by yourself, it could be a little bit intimidating and scary. I know for me, my very first trip by myself, it was actually to Dominican Republic. And I was a little bit older too. So my dad had passed away. I had to go back to the Dominican Republic, take care of like some financial affairs and whatnot. But I also kind of wanted to like decompress. My dad had passed away. I was dealing with a lot of other things on the back end, some health issues, and I just needed like a little getaway. And prior to that, I had never been by myself anywhere. Like I've flown by myself to places, but it was to meet other people or I had traveled with friends. I had never necessarily done solo travel where I was going to a destination and be alone. So being that I was going back to the Dominican Republic, I felt safe and secure. I picked a resort that I had been to previously on multiple occasions because it did provide me a little bit of sense of security. Plus, I knew I wasn't going to be leaving outside of the resort area. I was only going for like a couple of days. So I think planning ahead and finding a destination, especially if this is your first trip, where you have that confidence to do the solo travel. But I remember being on this trip, and again, this was a resort in Dominican Republic. This was like over 10 years ago. And I guess, solo female travel wasn't a big thing back then. I remember meeting a mother-daughter duo from the UK, and we were at the nightclub that was inside the resort where we were staying. And I was sitting down by myself, having a drink, just listening to music. And they came in later in the night. There was nowhere else to sit. So they asked if they can join me on the table. So I was like, of course. So we get talking. They asked me who I was with. And I said, oh, I'm just here by myself. They were like, oh my gosh, that's so cool that you're here alone, blah, blah, blah. So we were chatting it up and they were so sweet on the way back. They're like, oh, we'll walk you to where your room was located. So they walked me to like the area where my room was located. I went upstairs. And then the following day, I saw them in the morning and they're like waving at me. They were going like on a group trip and they were with a bunch of other people that they were doing like a group trip. So they waved me over. And they introduced me to everyone, but they introduced me as this is the girl from New York who's here by herself.
Dear.
And yeah, at first, like, I was just like, I thought it was like empowering. I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'm here by myself. They're telling everyone how cool it is that here I am alone. But then I thought about it and I was like, oh, like now all of these people that I have no idea who they are, they just announced this to everyone how I'm here alone. So in that second, I kind of felt a little like unsafe because they had advertised to everyone how here I am, alone, even though I was in a resort where I personally felt comfortable, a resort where I had been to before and like loved. I knew a lot of the staff that were on site and all that good stuff. But in that moment, like I felt unsafe. So I think one of the biggest safety tips for me would be just that, if you are traveling alone, don't necessarily tell people that you're there all by yourself, especially overseas in another destination. Even if you feel comfortable, you've been to that destination before. I feel like it strips you away from that sense of security when people know that you're alone and it makes you a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely. Like read the room and don't necessarily announce it, especially if you're out in mixed company. So when I first started traveling solo years ago, I was younger. I would stay in hostels and it was the norm for people in hostels to travel alone. Like a lot of people were there by themselves. So I felt like in that situation, it was okay. But yeah, if it's like, say, an all inclusive where it's more families and friends going, or if you're just like out and about, if you're not entirely sure of who's going to be around you, you're better off not announcing that to everyone or telling anyone because, like, in that case, it wasn't even you announcing it, it was people that you've met. So it's always like be mindful of those situations because it's true. Solo travel can be very empowering. I've done it multiple times myself. I love traveling alone. It's one of my most favorite things to do. But at the same time, you can be left vulnerable if people do that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Planning ahead is also important because, like, especially you're navigating a new destination. You don't want to get on the wrong train or the wrong bus, especially late at night, and end up somewhere where maybe you don't have cell phone service. You're, navigating, and that also kind of puts you a little bit at risk if you're not, if you don't know the destination. And again, I say these things not to scare you or to, make you think twice before doing solo travel. This is with the best intentions to let you know that being prepared is important. And solo travel, like Rachel said, is so empowering. We highly recommend doing it. I travel as a family, I travel with friends, and I also do solo traveling. And I really do love having that alone time to reconnect and recharge when I'm on my own. But so again, we're, saying these things to help you be prepared, not to promote fear in your mind or anything like that, because it's not. I mean, you just want to make sure you're not putting yourself in these type of dangerous situations, and also knowing the cultural norms of different destinations. Maybe, back home, we're from New Jersey, New York. So it's totally common for you to see women late at night, walking on the streets or going to like a bar or going to like a restaurant. That's totally normal back home, but there are some countries where that's not necessarily a cultural norm for women to kind of be on their own or, venture on to like bars or restaurants. So doing the research ahead of time and planning for that specific destination will help you be prepared and will make you feel more comfortable.
Totally. So research, research, research. Don't try to, if you're traveling solo, I know it's nice to have some flexibility and you want to allow for those like beautiful moments that are completely unplanned, but you do have to go in researching the destination ahead of time. So something that I do, I live in the United States, so I do go on travel.gov and research a specific location. And then what I also do to kind of supplement that, I know the UK, Australia, Canada, they have similar websites for their citizens about traveling overseas to different places. So I'll read travel.gov and then I'll also follow up with maybe the UK's travel guidance or Canada's because it gives me a broad perspective of what to expect when I go to a new destination. And it's also important to think about jet lag. I mean, it's not really a super sexy topic to talk about, but if you're taking a solo trip and you're going to a different country with a drastically different time change, it's even more important to do that research because you need to know how to get from the airport to your hotel or hostel safely. And you don't want to just wing that after a 10-hour flight because you will be exhausted. Like in my case, I'm a fearful flyer. I've talked about this on a previous episode, and I actually have to take medication in order to do these long flights. It's really strong. I'm not a doctor. I'm not advocating for a prescription or anything, but it does make me feel out of sorts when I get to a new destination. So it's so, so important that I know the public transportation like the back of my hand. I will look at it 50 million times to ensure that I get to my hotel safely. So just know that when you get to a new destination by yourself, you're going to be exhausted and you want to have like that knowledge on how to get to the hotel in your back pocket. You don't want to just wing it.
Yeah. And I think also too planning ahead, not just for your own, safety and mental sanity. I know for the people back home. So my daughter, she's away at school. And even though she's only 3 hours away, I still, think about it and worry about her. So when I don't know what she's doing or where she's at, I'm just like, oh my gosh, she hasn't texted me. She hasn't called me. So I can only imagine as a parent, if she were to travel overseas, I would want to know. Like, obviously, I don't expect to hear from her every second, but I would want to know, like, hey, where are you staying? An overall itinerary. So I can only imagine, I'm sure this goes for you as well, Rachel. Like, it gives your family some peace of mind if they know, okay, this is when your plane is supposed to land. This is around the time that you should be at the hotel. And for you to check in with them back home to let them know that you got to your hotel safely and checking in throughout the time. Because, like, even if, let's say, you got sick while you're traveling overseas, At least your parents know, okay, I can call the hotel. If I can't get a hold of you on your cell phone, this is where you're staying. I'm able to reach you. Or if you're traveling with like a group or like a tour company, having that information gives you some peace of mind, but also your family back home some peace of mind.
Absolutely, 100%. Like, I'm going to say my age. I'm 37 years old, and I still share my itinerary with my mom, and she tracks everything. I share my flights, I share my hotels, all of it. And I do try to text at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, just to keep her and my father in the loop. And like, on one hand, you might be thinking, oh, I'm this like super independent traveler. I'm doing this amazing thing, which you are. Solo travel is really empowering, but it's always good that somebody else knows what's going on. And something else you could do, this is for US citizens as an additional precaution. They do have a free program through the State Department called the STEP program. So the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, I think it's called. And you can register with the embassy ahead of time, and they'll give you any notifications if there's something going on in your destination. I can actually think of one off the top of my head. I was in Estonia and I was getting ready to leave to take the boat over to Finland, and I got a text from the State Department saying, hey, there's delays at the airport. There's been a bomb threat. They're not taking off right now. And even though I wasn't going to the airport, it was still a good thing to know. And I think it's either the State Department site or the individual embassy sites. If you do, God forbid, get sick, they have a list of English speaking doctors. There was this other time in Munich where it was the end of a 7-week trip. I was by myself. I was just not feeling well and my throat was really hurting. So I looked in the mirror, and not to be gross, these white pockets of pus all over the back of my mouth. And I was just like, if I feel worse tomorrow, I'm going to go to a doctor. And the consulate website for Munich did have a list of English speaking doctors if I needed that. So use these resources that are available, like our tax dollars pay for them, and you should be utilizing them.
No, that's a good tip. And staying prepared and being on high alert. Like if something feels a little sketchy, then maybe don't go there or don't do that. And again, a lot of destinations, I know I personally also have gone to like the government website, and sometimes they'll have like travel advisory level 4, do not go there. And I still gone there. So it shouldn't deter you, but be alert and be informed. If you are thinking of traveling to a destination where maybe it doesn't seem safe, use some precaution. But I always feel like sometimes people kind of also say, oh, this place is so unsafe. Coming from America, I'm like, in America, safety is also an issue. Mm-hmm. So definitely, be mindful of that and don't let that kind of deter you. But if your gut is telling you don't go there, then maybe, kind of put that destination on hold. I know for me, I mentioned I am team carry-on all the time. So I don't like paying for checking in my luggage. I don't like having to wait at baggage claim. I'm always afraid my baggage is going to get lost or whatever. So I always try to pack carry-on luggage, even though sometimes I do tend to overpack a little bit and bring my extra personal item and all that stuff. But whenever I do travel by myself, I try to pack as light as possible because one, I don't want to have to be navigating a new destination, chugging all luggage, where now my attention, instead of focusing on my surroundings, I'm too busy fumbling through my luggage, trying to find things, and also kind of puts you a little bit at risk sometimes too for like pickpocketing. So making sure that you are packing efficiently and not overdoing it to the point that now you're focusing your attention on like your personal items, keeping that safe. That can also add another layer to safety.
Yeah, definitely. So packing light, you're usually much better off. And think about it logistically, it's a smart thing. So let's say you are doing a solo trip to France, just to pick a random country, and you're going to be using their train system. The public transportation is excellent. If you're lugging all of these bags with you, it's also just like a pain in the butt to board your train. Like you have to be able to move quickly. And something like this happened to me. It was years ago. I think it was 2015. And I was starting my long 7-week solo backpacking trip in Berlin. This was before the new airport opened. So the old airport, they would actually have a bus service that would take you to Alexanderplatz, I think is where they would drop you off. And me, I just kind of thought my hostel was super close, but I misjudged on the map just how far it would be. And I had all of this like crap that I packed on my back. I'm exhausted. I didn't sleep on the flight. I have Xanax in my system. And I'm walking like over a mile to my hostel, exhausted. I'm getting text messages from my mom like, where the hell are you? Have you gotten there yet? No. And then I want to stop and take a break and I can't because I need to get to my hostel. And it was just a mess. So again, packing light, planning ahead, especially when you first get off at the airport, is really super useful because even if nothing bad happens from a safety perspective, just comfort perspective, like you want to be comfortable because when you're traveling by yourself, your stuff is your responsibility. You can't leave it with a friend, you can't leave it with a family member, and it's always better to have less than more.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I personally do whenever I am traveling by myself, so as a content creator, I go on press trips and, different tourism or hotel partnerships that I get to do. So one of the things that I personally do, I never post on social media like in real time, especially about where I'm staying. So whenever I'm posting stuff on social media, it's usually days after the fact that I went there or stood there just from a safety perspective. I don't want to advertise where I'm staying. And also, if I am staying in a hotel, when I check in, and this might sound a little paranoid, but one of the things I personally do when I check into a hotel, I always ask them to put me in a room where it's not like a adjoining room because I'm always paranoid of having an adjoining room and someone like randomly accessing my room while I'm sleeping. So again, that might sound a little paranoid, but it just brings me a layer of comfort. So like I know for myself, like if I'm staying somewhere, I'll normally tell them, especially when it's like a press trip, I've gone to places where, obviously they want to highlight their best room. So sometimes they'll put me like in a corner somewhere where now I'm walking by myself in the hallway. And I'm just like, oh, great. Of course, like my room is all the way at the end. So whenever possible, when I do check into a hotel, especially if it's not like a press trip, if it is a press trip where I'm working with the hotel, they'll obviously put me in whatever room they really want me to highlight. So I don't really make a big deal. But if it is something that I'm like kind of paying for myself, I usually tell them to put me like near the elevator and to make sure that it is not an adjoining room. Or if it's like a hotel where there's like a first floor, I also tell them not to put me on the first floor either. That just brings me a layer of comfort knowing that I don't have anyone right next to me that has access to my room. And being next to the elevator brings me comfort just because like I know like I don't have to walk in a long hallway, especially if it's late at night. So that just brings me comfort. I know I have friends that they want it to be far away from the elevator where it's pitch silent because they don't want to hear any noise. Whereas for me, it's the complete opposite. I can sleep through anything, so I don't mind. So like knowing what makes you feel comfortable and don't be afraid to ask for that. Maybe they might not be able to accommodate it, but at least it's worth asking.
So I actually have a hilarious story about going into the wrong hotel room when I was traveling alone. Not to scare you guys, I actually think it's funny, but not to scare you guys. So this was the press trip. It was actually in New York. My day started early on Thursday. So I decided I was going to fly in the night before. Newark had a late flight. I think we landed at like 11 p.m. in Rochester. And I stayed at one of the airport hotels because then I would get my rental car and be on my merry way. Well, I learned, I think it was a Marriott. You can check in and get a virtual key ahead of time on the app. So I did that. I'm like, I'm not going to, bother with this. I'm checking in. I have my key and whatnot. I go to my room and keep in mind, guys, I am checked into this room. I have a virtual key. I go up to the room, tap my key on the door, open it up, and there is this man sprawled in bed, sleeping. I slam the door. I go to the front desk and I'm like, I have this virtual key. I open my room and there's a man sleeping in there in his underwear, and the woman working at the front desk, her face, like the jaw, you could pick it up off the floor, and she was just like, don't worry, we'll put you in another room, it's all good. But I shared it on social media after the fact, and the tourism board I was working with DM'd me, and they were just like, oh my God, we can't believe that happened. We're so sorry. And obviously it wasn't their fault. I came early for the trip. I was paying for this hotel. Like it had nothing to do with the tourism board, but they were so apologetic. They were like, oh my God. And then my sister-in-law messaged me and she's like, Rachel, that's horrifying. She's like, but I don't know who that was more terrifying for, you or like the poor guy sleeping in what he thinks is his room. And you unlock the door, open it up at midnight, and you see him lying there.
At least he was sleeping and you didn't catch him in the act. That's why I always lock my door. I make sure I deadbolt it, and then I also put like the little lock. And I know some hotels room, they usually have that. I know some people that they travel with their own little thing where it's like they wedge it on the door so
Yeah, like a
you can't
doorstop.
open it. Yeah, so you can't open it.
Yeah, so that's a really good piece of the travel advice. I always deadbolt my door, and I do that anyway when I'm at home in my apartment. Like we have automatic locks, and it's a steel lock. Like you're probably not going to be able to break in. But just for my own peace of mind, I always deadbolt the door, and I do it in hotels. Please make sure you do that because who knows? I obviously was not trying to break into this room, but I had the virtual key. So deadbolt your doors. And that's really like with me personally, I'm very laid back about hotel rooms. I'm like, it's fine if it's wherever. I'm not really fussed about the location in the hotel, but deadbolting the door, I do not mess around with. I think that is like such an easy thing and the number one thing you can do to stay safe when you're traveling alone, because after that happened to me, I was like, well, I'm like, that could happen to anybody. So I am always going to be deadbolting that door.
I'm a sound sleeper, so sometimes I don't get easily woken up, which is a good and a bad thing, I guess. So sometimes I do get a little paranoid, and this happened recently. My daughter and I went to Connecticut, and the room we were staying was like kind of like an apartment style, and it was like right on the street, first floor. And there was like windows everywhere and the door. And I remember putting the chair like propped up, but I didn't like properly put it next to like, the handle. So my daughter goes like, Mom, like, what is happening here? And I'm like, yeah, somebody tries to break in. I can hear it because I was sleeping like right next to the door. And it was like close proximity to the door. So I was like, there's very zero room of opportunity for me to like run and do anything. So anyway, so she was so funny. She was like, you're supposed to like wedge it like, underneath the handle. Like you're just putting it next to the door. Like that does nothing, Mom. So I was like, yeah, you're right. So like I
So funny.
wedged the chair. And again, it might sound paranoid, but I was able to sleep at night because like now I was like, I have this chair there. And I didn't like being on the first floor where anyone that was passing by, they can essentially see inside our room. And it was in an area where it was still kind of central, but a little bit isolated. So again, just for my own peace of mind, I was like, yeah, no, we're wedging this chair.
And I like what you're saying about trusting your instinct and what's comfortable for you. Like, I think, especially as women, we do this, we can kind of second guess our instinct. Like, am I just being paranoid or am I being dramatic about this? Don't ever feel that way. Always go with your gut. Even if you feel silly, your gut is very powerful about warning you about certain situations. So you have to go with your gut, especially when you're traveling solo. Trust yourself, trust your instincts. If it's not comfortable, then don't do it.
That's what I always say. I was like, listen, these people don't even know me. So like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't care.
Was like, I do what I have to do for like my own mental sanity, so that we can sleep at night, be comfortable, not have to worry. And again, like obviously when I travel, I'm not like super paranoid. I'm not like thinking like, oh my gosh, something bad's always going to happen to me. But these are things that I personally like to do to feel safe and to feel comfortable. And not put myself in a situation where now I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't sleep. And it goes back to what we said at the beginning. It's like planning ahead and doing some research. So like whenever I am picking a hotel, I always try to read the reviews and just like if anything kind of stands out when it comes to safety and things like that, then I probably will pass on staying there. I know recently we did a local trip here in the US and we were going somewhere and I'm not going to name the destination.
Sorry, guys, you're going to have to guess.
Sorry. So anyway, so I waited to the very, very last minute to book my accommodation. So we ended up having to stay somewhere. And I was with Michael. And we got to the hotel and I looked at Michael. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, no. I was like, I want to go home. I started looking at other places and unfortunately I couldn't find another hotel to stay. But the reviews online didn't say anything. And I was like, what the heck? I never felt so unsafe staying somewhere. And the place wasn't cheap, but it was just like very sketchy. The people that were staying there were a little sketchy. And I was just like, yeah, no. So sometimes you do the research and then you still end up in these situations. I think if I wasn't with Michael, I probably would have slept in my car. I probably would have just slept in my car because I just did not want to be there at all. But because I was with him, I did feel a little bit more safe. But I think if I was by myself, I probably would have just like turned back home.
Yeah. And like, honestly, if you're in that situation, say if you're traveling solo and you get to your hotel or your hostel or whatever, and it's not what you expect it to be, like maybe the pictures were misleading, the reviews were misleading, whatever. If you can find a different form of accommodation for that night, even if it costs you extra money, just go for it because I get it. It sucks when you have to spend extra money, but money can always come back. You cannot. So don't ever feel bad about being like, you know what? I don't feel comfortable here. I am getting out of Dodge. I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. And at least then, like, you know, you're safe. And again, don't feel like you're overreacting. Trust your gut.
Exactly. I totally agree. And another thing too, when traveling by yourself is making sure that you're keeping your documents secure. So I
Mhm.
always make sure that I'm utilizing the safe, or I normally, if I'm traveling overseas where I need to bring like my passport with me, I normally just make sure that I have like a lock just because sometimes some hotel rooms might not have a safe. So you can put like any important documents, or like even if we're traveling, like maybe I have my laptop or certain, valuables that I want to make sure that I'm keeping safe. So I always bring like a lock with me. So that way when I am, out and about, I'll put all of my valuables inside my luggage if there's not a safe available, and I'll lock it up. So that way I'm kind of keeping that secure, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation, especially like your documents go missing and now you're stranded somewhere.
Yeah, totally. So, on the subject, keeping like your important documents in the safe, so important. You always want to keep them like somewhere secure. You don't necessarily want to be going around a city with them. And then something I always do, I have multiple credit cards, like shocker, I know, spoiler alert. But what I do is I always pick one or two credit cards to keep in the safe. And then if I get money out in the ATM, I split up the money and keep half of the money in the like safe. So if God forbid I do get pickpocketed when I'm out, I'm not out of all my money and all my cards. I have backups in the hotel room ready to go. And then if God forbid, say your passport does get pickpocketed, like it happens, something that's really helpful for the embassy, have a spare photo of that front photo page with all of your information on it because it does make getting a replacement passport a lot easier. So have spare photographs of your documents because that goes a long way. If, like it happens, like if say you're like looking the wrong way, it goes missing, then at least you have those photographs with you and you can get a replacement passport more easily.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that I personally also like to do, I like to print out my documents, especially if I'm traveling overseas. If I know I may not have cell phone reception and trying sometimes getting into the Wi-Fi is not feasible. So I always like to print out my documents. So like my hotel, I'll print out the confirmation with like the address information. So that way I can make sure that I'm getting into the right location, have that all accessible if in case I get lost, maybe my phone dies. So that's another great tip also too, is making sure that you have your batteries charged or backup battery, just because if you do find yourself in a situation where you maybe took the wrong train or end up somewhere else, that you have, accessibility to get to your phone and, a map or anything like that.
Yeah, because we really do use our phones for everything. I know I complain about this in the classroom, but having your phone is so important. So definitely have those chargers with you. I could think about this happened to me in Japan. Now, Japan is so super safe. I highly recommend it for solo travel because of the safety. I was in Nikko and I wasn't like feeling great. My stomach was not cooperating. So I'm like, I'm going to head back. So I get on the bus to go back, and suddenly I lose all service. Cell phone, dead. Data, dead. My phone turned into a brick, and I'm like, I'm going to restart it. Restarted the phone. Nothing happened. Still a brick, dead. So the bus dropped us off at the train station, and the train station thankfully had Wi Fi. So I got on the Wi-Fi and there was nothing being discussed on social media. So I'm like, the only place I could think to go is Reddit because like Verizon wasn't saying anything on their website. I go to Reddit and apparently Verizon, they had an international outage for all of their international clients. So nobody had access to their cell phones or their data or anything. People were posting on the Verizon Reddit, like, I'm lost in Paris. I don't know how to get my phone to work. It was like one after the other. So what I ended up having to do was I installed an eSIM on my phone. So I had a temporary Japanese number with data on it. And I was able to contact my parents and be like, I know this may be coming from a Japanese number, but this is what happened. So always have a backup plan because things go wrong and you need to be savvy and able to address it yourself because like there's nobody else.
Yeah. No, eSIMs are a good option too. I usually do that when I travel overseas because the Verizon roaming charges can definitely be expensive, even though they have like a data plan, like a daily plan where you can pre-purchase it. I personally do the eSIMs as well. And I think one of the great things about solo travel is the flexibility, right? You can do what you want, when you want to do it. You can do as much as you want. But I think also too, when you're traveling by yourself, and you touched on this earlier too, Rachel, it's like, don't overplan. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're tired because maybe you're not as alert as you would want to be. And, I like to have fun. I like to go out, but also to being mindful, right? You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're going out. Maybe you're drinking. You want to make sure that you're conscious that you're not overdoing it to the point that you're not aware of your surroundings or putting yourself into a bad situation.
And definitely with the drinking, just be like mindful of how much you're consuming. I know it's fun to be away and all, but first of all, you just don't want to get sick. I mean, I don't want to get sick when I'm traveling, but just be aware of like how much you're having to drink. But if you do want to go out and enjoy the nightlife, because I'm not the sort of person to be like, never go out at night. Now, obviously, this varies from location to location and on the culture. If you want to go out and enjoy like the nightlife, look for like guided pub crawls, because there are a ton of them. That way you have the safety in numbers where you can experience that nightlife, but you're not completely by yourself. So there are options out there to enjoy it safely.
Exactly. And that's a good tip too. Joining a group trip. Just because you're traveling by yourself doesn't mean that you have to do everything alone. Doing group trips is a great way for you to be able to be around other people, still enjoying certain things. And like you said, especially if you want to do something at night, like the ghost tour that we did in St. Augustine was a ton of fun. So that's a great way for you to be able to like walk around like a neighborhood late at night and not feel unsafe. Definitely looking into different like walking tours in the destination that you're traveling to. That would kind of give you a little bit more a comfort level and makes you feel a little bit more safe while still getting to enjoy the destination.
Yeah, there's safety in numbers. And if you're anything like me, I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love talking to people. Having those group tours do break up the monotony of the day. So even just from a perspective of my own enjoyment, like I like, say, doing an art museum by myself where I can like read everything and like take my time and zone out. But when it comes to something like a pub, like I want other people around. I want to enjoy it with a crowd. So in that case, I'll opt for a group tour. So just because you're traveling alone doesn't mean that you're going to be by yourself 100% of the time. And I am a really big fan of hostels, especially in Europe. Now, I'm getting to an age where I'm a little too old to be in dorm rooms. I'm not going to do that. But if you're like in your 30s and you're like, oh, I want to give hostels a try, in Europe, there are a lot of hostels that do have wonderful private rooms with an ensuite bathroom. It's like similar to a 2-star hotel. And that way you have the privacy and comfort of your own room, but you could also take advantage of the group tours the hostel offers. You could take advantage of making friends at the hostel so you don't feel so isolated. And that's a good option too, if that's like something you're open to trying.
Yeah. And I think, just to recap a little bit of what we're saying here, solo travel is a great thing. It, definitely puts you out of your comfort zone, but it could be scary. So you could be a little bit nervous or hesitant. So why not try something like local? Or maybe you're not necessarily ready to travel abroad. So maybe take yourself out like on a solo day. Say I'm in New Jersey. Maybe I'll go to New York City for the day and kind of experience that, or go out to dinner by myself. Just doing little things that, kind of elevates you and gives you a little bit more of peace of mind and encourages you to go out there and take on that solo adventure. Because putting yourself out in uncomfortable situations, it also helps you grow. So I think solo travel is very empowering. And again, these are just some tips that at least that we have that can help you travel safely.
And going back to an additional safety tip, and this one is very important. So I have very good health insurance as a teacher in the United States. I'm very fortunate, but that health insurance does not cover me if I go overseas. So something to be aware of, a lot of credit cards now, they advertise their travel insurance, but 9 times out of 10, the travel insurance will cover things like a flight delay or lost luggage, something like that. Whereas the actual health insurance component is not there. And if you're going somewhere more like, say, isolated, let's say you're doing a road trip around Iceland and you're hiking and you break your ankle and you have to be airlifted to a hospital, you're going to be out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you want to make sure that you also have that health insurance component that does cover you overseas. Now, because I do a lot of international trips, I buy an annual plan with Allianz Insurance. So it's good for the entire year. So I don't have to keep remembering, okay, it's time to renew my health insurance when I go overseas, because my American insurance isn't going to cover me overseas. And again, I'm not sure 100% about the case for other countries where they have government funded healthcare, but I don't know if they would necessarily cover overseas either. So just always be aware of how you're covered and get supplemental insurance if you need it, because you don't want to run the risk of then going to a hospital and now you're looking at a $50,000 bill.
Yeah, that's a good one. And some destinations will require you in order for you to travel there. I remember when I went to Cuba, that was one of the requirements that you had to produce copies that you had travel insurance before going there. And I know like some group trips, if you get to do that, they also require you to have travel insurance. And we're going to have an episode strictly about travel insurance and the importance of that. I know I had some friends, they went to Dubai and they were doing like a camel experience in the desert. And my friend's wife, when she went to get off the camel, she fell and she got hurt. She ended up having to be hospitalized in Dubai. And same thing, they had to come out of pocket for these expenses. And it could add up, you know? And I mean, I don't know exactly how much the bill was, but I remember it being like a pretty hefty amount. So making sure that you are covered, again, it brings you a layer of comfort. So doing whatever you can to make you feel comfortable. That's the whole important part of this episode, is empowering and encouraging you to get out there and travel, but to travel, you know, safely and smartly.
Yeah, definitely. And Rosa and I were not discouraging you if you really want to travel alone, but we're giving you these tips because you want to be proactive and not reactive. If you have all of these safety tips in your back pocket, you will feel a lot more confident. And then something else you could do, like on the cell phone thing, we use our cell phones for everything. I know some of you may be like, oh, I don't want to do this, but it could be worthwhile to switch your location on for a family member or a friend so they can see where you are. I know like some people might be like, well, I don't really want to do that. Honestly, like it's just another layer of comfort. It really doesn't bother me. So that could be another way to reassure your loved ones, especially if you're a bit younger. I know I have a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are in college and maybe wanting to do their first solo trip. Like it does provide a layer of comfort to your parents and your loved ones if you switch that location on. So, you know, just do it.
Yes. And I'm going to wear my mom hat. To all you young folks, it's fun. Go out there, you know, have a good time, but please be smart and don't do drugs.
No, don't. Absolutely not. Again, I'm putting on my teacher hat. So if you're a former student of mine, yes, this is addressed at you. Follow the laws in the country. Please don't end up unlocked up abroad. Don't do drugs, especially like say Thailand. Like I know Thailand's really popular because of the White Lotus eyes. Those prisons are no jokes. Just don't do it. Follow the laws. And even like with my trip to Japan, I had to triple check that I was able to bring my Xanax into the country. And that's something that's prescribed regularly here for anxiety. But in some countries, like you're not supposed to bring that. And especially say if you have ADD medications, say if you are on anything for that, a lot of countries, Adderall is banned. Japan, Adderall, you can't bring it. They treat it the same as heroin. So do not do it. Triple check these requirements because I don't want to see anyone in a prison overseas, especially if you're a former student of mine. I would be very disappointed in you.
Exactly. Like even for myself as an adult, I'm not gonna say my age. Even as an adult, you know, I am mindful. I want to go out. I want to go out with friends. I know, for instance, I was in Mexico and I was with a group of friends. I was staying by myself in the hotel and we all went out for like drinks and we were all in different like areas of Playa del Carmen. So where I was staying was a little further away from where my friends were staying. So like I knew like here we are. It was late at night. You know, I was mindful of that. I was like, I don't want to be drinking a little too much where now I'm not feeling so well. Like you never know, even though it was a short walk. And not that I didn't feel unsafe or anything, but like for me personally, I was like, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm drinking a little bit too much. Now I'm like stumbling back to my hotel, end up at the wrong place. Or you never know, you can like fall and get hurt. Like anything can happen. So just being, you know, mindful and safe, like go out there, have a great time. Like I'm an advocate for, you know, going out there, enjoying yourself, but with limitations. Never put your safety at risk or the safety of others.
Yeah, totally. And like always be aware again of the local laws. You don't want to get busted for public intoxication. Just, you know, just be careful. And my rule of thumb is if I wouldn't do something here in New Jersey and New York City, probably a good idea not to do it overseas. I know places vary, but I'm not going to go down an alley by myself at 4 a.m. in Manhattan. So you know what? I'm not going to do that in Paris either. Just a good rule of thumb. And we're not like victim blaming or anything here. Like obviously if something happens, the responsibility lies 100% on the criminal. But I mean, if you wouldn't do it at home, don't do it overseas.
Exactly. Yeah. So prevention, like Rachel said, is key. So do you have like any like last minute takeaways for our audience?
So, solo travel, definitely do it. It's amazing. I would recommend if you're nervous about it, stick with somewhere local. Like, again, I'm in New Jersey, so New York City's a great option. But honestly, if you can travel solo in New York City, you will probably be fine. And a lot of destinations, like New York City, is pretty intense. Actually, I love it. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. But if you could do that, like, you'll be more than fine. And I know we talked about this on another episode, but maybe go to a destination where you can speak the language, where the tourism infrastructure is really good. For my first solo trip, I went to Scotland. There were plenty of group activities I could join. Tourists were very common. It wasn't like unusual to see tourists walking around. So it was easy for me to find things to do and places to go that cater to tourists that made it easier. So I would definitely just like start with an easier destination first and then save the more challenging destinations for later. Like there's nothing to be embarrassed about by picking a more like safe in air quotes destination. Like do what you feel comfortable with the start. And Rosa and I are here if you have any questions about it. If you have a solo trip in mind, but you're not sure if you want to do it or not, or if you need like additional support, we're both here with good advice for you. So how about you, Rosa? Any last minute tips that you would like to give to our audience?
No, I think we kind of covered it all. And like the biggest takeaway for me is just that trust your instinct. If something feels off, then, maybe just think about it. Maybe, like you said, maybe pick a different destination where you feel a little bit more comfortable. Maybe this is your first solo trip. You're not going to embark on like a longer journey. Maybe if you don't speak the language. So doing something that does still make you feel comfortable, but also be adventurous and take the risk because solo traveling is very empowering and you're going to have a great time, but just make sure that you're being safe and just being aware of your surroundings and not putting yourself at high risk or in situations where something can happen.
Yeah, 100%. And like we said earlier, trust your gut. I know on social media, like we're content creators, we get social media can be a lot of fun, but you'll see people doing all these like really cool, like out there things and going to these amazing destinations. But like if you don't feel comfortable doing something, say you're like, I don't really want to go paragliding by myself, or I don't really want to do a solo trip to Antarctica and get sick on the boat ride there, then you don't have to. Like solo travel looks different for everyone and don't feel pressured to do things that you're flat out not comfortable with. Like, yeah, you can like bump up against your comfort zone and get out of it a little bit. But if your gut is telling you no, you can say no and you don't have to be ashamed about it. We're all different.
Exactly. Just, we hope that we inspire you to continue to get out there, be adventurous, enjoy the freedom that comes with traveling. But just again, being mindful of your surroundings, being safe, checking in with your family back home, that also will provide them with some, kind of sense of comfort. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, Rachel and I are here if you have any questions or if you have any recommendations or tips on how we can stay safe while traveling out there. We definitely love hearing from you guys. So make sure to follow us along on social media. You can find us at Bon Voyage Besties on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everywhere, anywhere.
All the things, all the things. So give us a follow and say hi. We're here for you guys. And we look forward to learning all about your solo travels. So we love you all. Bon voyage, besties. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care.